To realize an ambitious vision, it takes courage, it takes imagination and resilience. It also takes commitment to push through the day so we can get a better tomorrow. Welcome to Sweden. Few nations are frontrunners and Sweden is among one of them. Home to some of the most admired ideas, Sweden is among the global leaders in innovation and sustainability. Sweden are working hard by finding new ways of being sustainable. New ways where you can choose how to power up your homes, just like you choose your breakfast. Where you can grow an organic food in the middle of the city, maximizing the use of space, where waste becomes a resource that is recycled and consumed. Nothing then is truly wasted. But it wasn't always like this. From being one of the poorest European countries, Sweden transformed itself into one of the richest, most advanced world economies. As Sweden's natural resources deflated, Sweden learned that the global development and the environment are interlinked. Pollution from other country impacts the others, and it adds up over time. So, Sweden choose green growth, and the returns are significant. Sweden is well on its way to becoming a carbon neutral country while maintaining stable economic growth. Dedicated agencies have been set up for a sustainable future. Sweden are committed to staying the course. Sweden's government presents a climate report in its budget bill every year and support research and innovative policies in sustainable technologies. Join us in our presentation. Let's flip the switch for a greener tomorrow, because sustainability is everybody's business. Description of the country by Michaela Angela Abinido.
14,000 years ago, Sweden was still covered by a thick ice cap, so as the ice retreated, people moved in. Alice Stone pictured here are from the Iron Age before Vikings, war-hungry kings, peace, and the race into modernity. From 8000 to 6000 BC, Sweden as a whole became populated by people who lived by fishing, hunting, and gathering, and also they used simple stone as tools. Dwelling places and graves dating from the Stone Age, lasting until about 1800 BC, are found today in increasing numbers. So after 500 BC, such artifacts became increasingly rare as iron came into more general use. During the early Iron Age, the population of Sweden became settled and agriculture came to form the basis of the economy and society. The modern Swedish state was formed over a long period of unification and consolidation. So over the following centuries, Swedish influence would expand into the north and the east, even if borders were often ill-defined or non-existent. There then historians have set different standards for when it can be considered complete. In the late 14th century, Sweden was becoming increasingly intertwined with Denmark and Norway, with the three eventually uniting in the Kalmar Union. So the Kalmar Union was a personal union in Scandinavia, agreed at Kalmar in Sweden, that from 1397 to 1523 joined under a single monarch the three kingdoms of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, together with Norway's overseas colonies. During the 17th century, after winning wars against Denmark, Norway, Russia, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Sweden emerged as a great power by taking direct control of the Baltic region. During the following century, a series of rebellions lessened Sweden's ties to the Union, sometimes even leading to the election of a separate Swedish king. The Sweden's role in the 30 Years' War determined the political and religious balance of power in Europe. Before the end of the 17th century, a secret alliance was formed between Denmark, Norway, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and Russia against Sweden. So this coalition acted at the start of the 18th century when Denmark, Norway, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and Russia launched surprise attacks on Sweden. Sweden's last war was the Swedish-Norwegian War. Sweden was victorious in this war, leading to the Danish king being forced to cede Norway to Sweden. So during the Cold War, Sweden was suspicious of the superpowers, but this sentiment lessened as the situation progressed, and Sweden continued to remain neutral. Sweden's land area is about 450,000 kilometers, with a distance between extreme northern and southern points of almost 1,600 kilometers. Geographically, Sweden is dominated by forests, lakes, and rivers, but with a great variation landscape, temperature, and natural resources. So the border to Norway runs parallel to a range of mountains where cultivated area amounts to around 10% of the land surface area. In 2019, the total population in Sweden amounted to 10,327,589 inhabitants. So the population is very unevenly distributed over the country, with most of the people aggregated to the southern third of the country. The number of Swedes living in densely populated area has increased steadily, and even some of the densely populated areas have experienced difficulties in trying to stem the outflow of people. However, the greatest difficulties are experienced in sparsely populated areas with poor transportations and few employment opportunities. The education system in Sweden. The Swedish school system is tax-financed and regulated through the Education Act, which mandates 10 years of school attendance for all children from the year they turn 6. First is the preschool. In Sweden, preschool is provided by municipalities for children ages 1 to 5. The amount of municipal subsidy for preschool depends on the child's age and whether the parents work, study, are unemployed, or on parental leave for other children. So, Swedish preschool emphasizes the importance of play in a child's development, with a curriculum aiming to ensure children's individual needs and interests. Next is the compulsory schooling. It consists of 4 stages. So children between age 6 and 13 are also offered out-of-school care before and after school hours. Third is the upper secondary school. It is optional. There are 18 regular national programs of 3 years to choose from, 6 of which are preparatory for higher education, such as university, and 12 are vocational. So while entrance requirements vary between programs, all of them demand students to have passing grades in Swedish, English, and mathematics from their final year. Lastly is the charter schools. The number of independent schools with public funding, so-called charter schools, is growing in Sweden. So following a law change in the 1990s, parents and their children can choose among tuition-free schools, whether municipal or private. Although private schools have been in existence for as long as there has been compulsory education in Sweden, they were not widespread competitive alternatives to municipal schools until the law provided them with public funding. The culture, language, and society of Sweden. The people who came to be called Swedes were mentioned by the Roman historian Tacitus in 98 CE. Sweden has been a sovereign state for more than a millennium, and this has fostered cultural cohesion. Centuries of relative ethnic, religious, and linguistic homogeneity were followed by substantial immigration during the last 60 years, creating a multicultural society. So most citizens speak Swedish as their first language and English as their second. Swedish is a North Germanic language related to Norwegian, Danish, and Icelandic, so it has incorporated elements of German, French, English, and Finnish. So the language has been nationally standardized for more than a century, but regional variations and pronunciations persist. English is a required second language in school. Next is that public school system allows immigrant children to continue studying their first languages as a supplement to their studies. In In 1928, Prime Minister Per Albin Hansson described Sweden as people's home. This metaphor of the nation as a great family household helped nourish the general welfare society for the remainder of the century. Another significant set of symbols is linked in Sweden's agrarian past like summer dances, maples, painted wooden horses from the province of Dalarna and Christmas feasts. While industrialization and urbanization came late helping. The flag was often downplayed as a symbol, so in the decades after World War II, internationalist ideals made it embarrassing to exhibit the flag to a degree that would be normal in other countries. So by the early 1990s, the flag had become popular in the small subculture of anti-immigrant, right-wing extremists, so this made it unattractive to the rest of the population. And the partial relinquishment of sovereignty to the European Union is seen by many people as jeopardizing national integrity. Renewed interest in the flag is one response to that situation. The food and economy in Sweden. It is customary to identify certain items as particularly Swedish because of their association with agricultural or early industrial past. Breakfast typically includes bread with butter or cheese, cornflakes, yogurt, milk, and coffee. Effective regulation has made Swedish food perhaps the safest in the world. Standardized symbols identify foods that are low-fat, ecologically certified, or produced abroad under humane working conditions. So vegetarian, vegan, and animal rights movements have prompted Sweden to become the first European Union member to outlaw battery cages. So the economy is unusually diversified for a small country. Sweden is home to several giant transnational corporations which dominate foreign trade. So their economic and political might is counterbalanced by large labor unions and a strong public sector. Next, exports account for 36% of the gross domestic product in a nation that has been open to globalization of its economy. So Sweden was early in opening its telecommunications and other key domestic markets to foreign competition. And lastly, European Union membership has forced the country to become less liberal in its trade policy, so Sweden has not joined the European Monetary Union. Its currency remains the krona. The political life in Sweden. Sweden is a parliamentary democracy with a ceremonial monarch. 4 constitutional laws define the form of government and guarantee freedom of the press and expression as well as open access to public documents. A unicameral parliament is elected by universal adult suffrage in a proportional representation system. Parties typically divide into a left-leaning socialist bloc and a right-leaning bourgeois bloc. So a party or coalition of parties in the more successful bloc forms an administration consisting of a prime minister and about 20 other cabinet members. The legal system is less elaborately codified than continental European systems, but less reliant on case law precedents that is Anglo-American law. So new legislation is prepared with the help of official commissions of inquiry that produce exhaustive published reports. Next is that there are no executions and prison is reserved principally for those who commit violent crimes. Fines are issued in proportion to the income of the guilty party. And lastly, there are specialized ombudsmen for children's rights, disabled persons' rights, consumer issues, journalistic ethics, equal opportunities for men and women, prevention of ethnic discrimination, and prevention of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation.
Development stages and its factors by Theresa May Importante. Sweden was once considered a very backward country, especially during the early 19th century. This was due to the religious oppression which existed in the region at that time. The situation was better in countries such as Denmark, USA, and the UK. Then the economy of Sweden was ruled by guilds and restrictions which were truly medieval. And then came Johann August Krupenstad. He was the person who made Sweden a liberalism country. How was liberalism introduced in Sweden? By a series of speeches in the parliament, he garnered enough support and promoted the idea that wealth can truly be accumulated through liberalism. The people were moved and hence Sweden moves towards becoming a liberal state. The following changes were brought into effect. First, the system of a guild was abolished forever and anyone could start a business of their choice. Second, the free form of trade was on the rise. People could trade within the city and if they wish, trade between cities. This was a sort of trade freedom which never existed in Sweden before. Third, taxes were meager comparison to other countries. Fourth, the traditional political system was earlier based on four estates such as nobles, clergy, burghers, and newmen. This was then replaced by a system which was bicameral. Such changes were never anticipated in the Swedish society. It was hard to believe at first, but people got used to it with time. By the system of free enterprise in place, Sweden had the base to create and harbor some of the world's biggest companies. Sweden became a place where doing business was more of a pleasure than a pain. Emphasis on development. The state government began paying a lot of emphasis on developing the infrastructure of the region as well. This was in the form of good roads, sanitation facilities, and education infrastructure. To achieve this, they need capital which was in the form of loans borrowed from neighboring states. The money was duly spent on improving the infrastructure of Sweden. Things were going on pretty much fine. Sweden began to industrialize. In the mid-19th century, while a host of European nations were moving away ahead of the global average GDP per capita, Sweden managed to catch up with the United Kingdom by the early 1950s. This led to becoming marginally richer than its neighboring states. However, by the 1980s, Sweden had overtaken the United Kingdom and cemented itself as one of the richest nations in the world. Despite it hitting a few economic downfalls along the way, it has managed to bounce back and return even stronger than ever. Absence from major wars. While the world nations were at loggerheads with each other during the World War I and World War II, Sweden opted to set out both the wars. While other nations were sending their military arsenal and weapons, Sweden was busy developing its surroundings. The money it earned utilized to pay off its debts, while its neighbors were busy destroying each other. The base for a healthy and sustainable future was set, with no distractions such as political unrest and wars. Sweden could concentrate its efforts towards inventions along with concentrating on the overall development of the nations. Sweden's wealth distribution. The wealth distribution in Sweden is a cause for concern. It has been reported that almost 10% of the total population control close to 70% of the country's wealth. This means that the rich are getting even richer. However, unlike other countries, the middle class enjoy a high standard of living. This is all down to the policies put forth by the state government. Education is a free at cost, along with a host of other facilities provided by the government. Health insurance is free and every citizen is entitled to an exciting pension scheme post-retirement. Because of these reasons, Sweden boasts one of the highest GDP per capita. It is a model which modern-day nations are urged to follow. Sweden is now well known as the home of the mega-rich. Sweden has also worked towards diversifying its economy. Sweden has been ranked as the most competitive country in the world to do business, such as a free and tension-free business environment is a perfect place for companies to flourish. The biggest of firms for flourishing and their owners are becoming even the richer. According to reports, there are more than 25 billionaires in Sweden, which is even more outstanding than it is a country of close to only 9 million people. Sweden continues to be one of the richest countries in the world. It's not just wealth that make it rich, but it's the happiness of its citizens as well. This is a modern-day model of how countries should actually function, paying attention to overall national development rather than focusing on political tensions is the key to a stable and rich country. Country's development status by Nathanael Mark Serbo.
The economy of Sweden is a developed, export-oriented economy aided by timber, hydropower, and iron ore. These constitute the resource base of an economy oriented toward foreign trade. The main industries include motor vehicles, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, industrial machines, precision equipment, chemical goods, home goods and appliances, forestry, iron, and steel. It is a competitive and highly liberalized open market economy. The vast majority of Swedish enterprises are privately owned and market-oriented, combined with a strong welfare state involving transfer payments involving up to 3/5 of GDP. In 2014, the percent of national wealth owned by the government was 24%. Sweden's engineering sector accounts for 50% of output and exports. Telecommunications, the automotive industry, and the pharmaceutical industries are also of great importance. Agriculture accounts for 2% of GDP and employment. The armaments industry has a technologically highly advanced reputation. It's a world leader in privatized pensions, and pension funding problems are small compared to many other Western European countries. The Swedish labor market has become more flexible, but it still has some widely acknowledged problems. The typical worker receives only 40% of his income after the tax wedge. The slowly declining overall taxation, 51% of GDP in 2007, is still nearly double of that in the United States or Ireland. Civil servants amount to a third of Swedish workforce, multiple times the proportion in many other countries. Overall, GDP growth has been fast since reforms in the early 1990s, especially in manufacturing. In Sweden. Sweden, a Nordic country in Northern Europe known for its progressive politics, is home to a population of 10.3 million. Although Sweden is a relatively wealthy country, 16.2% of its people are at risk of falling to poverty. Sweden's risk of poverty is defined as not meeting the criteria for severe material poverty or low-income standards. Citizens with low-income standards are those whose household income is inadequate to afford necessary living costs. Currently, 6% of Sweden's population fall under low-income standards. 16. Statistics Sweden announced that less than 1% of the population in Sweden suffers from severe material poverty. Sweden defines severe material poverty by not being able to afford at least 4 of the following 6 components: unforeseen expenses, a week's holiday per year, a meal with meat or fish every other day, satisfactory heating and housing, capital goods and bills. Since 2015, Sweden's unemployment rate has declined by more than 0.35% per year. In 2018, the employment rate was 6.35%, which was a 0.37% decline from 2017. However, due to COVID-19, unemployment rates grew to 8.2% in Sweden as of April 2020. Sweden's welfare system reduces poverty across the country. Sweden offers a standard minimum income for all its citizens, providing approximately 60% to 70% of the average wage in Sweden. Swedish law additionally ensures all workers earn 25 paid vacation days and 6 public holidays each year. Sweden offers equality between genders, especially in the workplace. In 2009, the Swedish Discrimination Act required employers to promote equality between men and women and ban workplace harassment. Then, in 2016, Sweden updated its parental leave for both parents to have 3 months of paid leave. Nevertheless, Sweden has room for improvement, and as there is still a 10% wage gap between men and women. Incorporation of equal education opportunities beyond gender or socio-economic status help increase opportunities for Swedish citizens, thus limiting poverty expansion. Sweden's Education Act protects free education equality for citizens aged 6 to 19. In 2017, Sweden reported more than 90% of Swedish students receive living qualifications equivalent to that of a United States high school diploma. For equal opportunities benefits everyone, including the disabled. The Swedish government and parliament authorized several disability policies. The policies cover accessibility, regulations for disabled citizens across housing, transportation, and employment sectors.
Development Landmarks and Development Theories Analysis. Carl Gunnar Myrdal, Theory on Labor Market Regulation and Economic Development of the Functioning of the Labor Market. Myrdal maintains that a deregulated labor market tends to spontaneously produce increasing levels of unemployment cuts. In contrast with the conventional view of his time, or what he labeled equilibrium economics from Monetary Equilibrium 1931, Myrdal upholds that a deregulated market economy is unable to spontaneously generate a social environment characterized by harmony of interest. In this context, income inequality perpetuates both within countries and between countries. For the purpose of obtaining a more equal economic distribution and higher economic growth, an external intervention is necessary. By means of the creation and the progressive expansion of welfare state, more peculiarly, it will be shown that for Myrdal, economic growth is driven by labor market regulation, increasing public transfer to the benefit of workers and the payment of unemployment benefits. In a theoretical schema, where aggregate demand and aggregate supply systematically interact according to a cumulative process. So Gunnar Myrdal theory of interregional divergence and the connected theory of circular cumulative causation of Anton F. 1998, he approaches these issues within a broader discussion on the welfare state, defining it as an institutional setting based on state intervention or even state planning, as opposed to that based on a free economy. More specifically, while he does not provide a definite definition of what he means by welfare state, he implicitly defines it by means of several examples of state and intervention designed to improve the well-being of the less privileged groups in democratic society. For instance, the social housing by Myrdal, 1958. Myrdal approach radically opposes the neoclassical view. He shows that the institutionalist approach is more appropriate in dealing with these issues, which it would be hard to analyze using the standard axiom of rationality. He believes that for the sake of a realistic analysis of the economic process, economists and social scientists have to take into account factors relating to the distribution of power in society, impulses, habits, customs, routines, and beliefs, which mold agents' action, that is, factors which fall outside the utilitarian view of human behavior. Moreover, institutional political economy is conceived as a holistic approach to the study of social economic phenomena. Aggression, 1997. Myrdal clarifies that institutional political economy must reject the distinction between economic and non-economic factors. Birger 2008 points out that CCC, or circular cumulative causation, is the main antithesis to mechanistic analogy and stable equilibrium of the social and economic system. Phenomena involving CCC processes are not necessarily never-ending vicious circles, both because, according to Myrdal, vicious circles are the outcome of deregulated market economy, so that external intervention can stop them, and because CCC is no doctrine of hopelessness, because vicious circles can be broken and virtuous circles are possible, by Birger 2008. Both remarks are relevant, as will be argued according to Myrdal. A deregulated labor market spontaneously produces unemployment in a vicious circle where the unemployment rate tends to grow over time. External intervention, namely state intervention, designed to regulate the labor market, which can reverse these dynamics, thus generating a virtuous circle of increasing employment, increasing wages, and the growth rate. It is important to stress that in this theoretical framework, historical time plays a crucial role, and more importantly, CCC processes normally develop in context where major variables more with different speeds over time. As a result, the reversal of a vicious circle requires time, and its impact on the relevant variables not only is not immediate, but above all, is subject to a time lag, so that some variables are affected before others. This can happen because of the existence of phenomena of institutional inertia, which is the change in habits of thoughts normally occurs over a long period of time. So, or because some relevant factors are subject to slow variation over time due to their particular technical or physical features. This applies, for instance, to the effect on labor productivity of the rise in education levels and improvement of workers' health. As Myrdal states, a change in level of education or health is achieved slowly, and its effect on the other factors are delayed, so that there is a lag in the whole process of accumulation. So Myrdal's view on the rule of expansion of the welfare state is promoting economic development is ultimately based on critics of the dominant view that a deregulated market economy tends to spontaneously generate the most efficient allocation of resources and full employment by Cherrer 2009. Myrdal observes is based on the liberal idea that in all market, and particularly in the labor market, agents have the same bargaining power. The interplay of demand and supply automatically guarantees equilibrium, and an equilibrium condition is conceived as the realization of the harmony of interest, which is a natural outcome of capitalist dynamics. Myrdal opposes the conventional view attributed to Alfred Marshall, states that greater income equality is incompatible with sustained growth of economies. So furthermore, Myrdal insists that the defense of the welfare state cannot rest on the moral argument that economic justice is preferable to injustice. This leads to oppose the conventional view that increased income equality reduces efficiency. For instance, in this theoretical perspective, wage increases reduce employment. Myrdal's aim is to demonstrate that the reduction of income inequality increases efficiency and, in turn, greater efficiency, which is a higher economic growth, which lessens inequalities. The basic policy intervention pertains to labor market regulation in the form of increasing wages and reducing job insecurity, state provision of health services and education, and the payment of unemployment benefits. While the first two types of intervention are devoted to increasing labor productivity, the latter aims at sustaining the path of investments. Even in this case, a CCC process is in operation. Myrdal was also confident that in the long run, both because of the growth of the levels of education and the increasing demand for public policies to the benefit of workers, the expansion of the welfare state would preserve the interest of all parties in the economy, so that the opposition of the reactionary forces will almost inevitably be overcome. In this respect, Myrdal's theory of created harmony provided further support for Keynesian economic policies. It is to be stressed that when Myrdal wrote on these issues, the prevailing culture climate was in favor of public intervention, and the growing bargaining power of workers in the socio-political arena pushed public policies in that direction. It was on these grounds that Myrdal remarks that public opinion and most politicians agree that economically as well as socially, the welfare state is a conspicuous success by Myrdal 1958. Myrdal's theory of the labor market has been stressed that, in contrast with the conventional view of his time, a deregulated market economy is unable to spontaneously generate a social environment characterized by harmony of interests, and income inequality becomes a self-sufficient phenomenon. On the contrary, once labor market institutions are put into a dynamic picture of economic development, Myrdal shows that economic growth is driven by labor market regulation, by increasing public transfer to the benefit of workers, and by paying unemployment benefits in a theoretical scheme where aggregate demand and aggregate supply systematically interact according to a cumulative process.
Conclusion and lesson learned. Sweden's sustainable development is widely used and well known. With Sweden's long tradition of consensus policy and the strong involvement of different interest groups in the policy decision-making processes, the idea of sustainable development as a holistic policy concept fell on fruitful ground. Sweden built up the sustainable development discourse on experience derived from earlier approaches, which indicated that it is possible to combine sustainable development with high levels of economic and social welfare. It can be concluded that sustainable development is firmly rooted within the Swedish society. Sustainable development has become indispensable in political debates and is understood as a crucial argument in management decisions. For Sweden, the remaining question is whether sustainable development will be seen as an important ingredient in the renewal of the Swedish model, or if sustainable development will become the guiding principle of a new Swedish model. That would be all. Thank you and God bless.